You know that feeling when you wake up just moments before your alarm? Ever wonder how your body just knows? Well, the secret is this tiny biological machine, an internal clock that's ticking away inside all of your cells. And for decades, the key to figuring this all out came from a pretty unlikely hero, the common fruit fly. So let's dive into the Nobel Prize-winning science behind how these genes keep time. So, if you've ever watched a fruit fly, you'll notice they're most active right around dawn and dusk. But here's the really cool part. It's not just a reaction to the light changing. Nope. Even if you put them in complete darkness, they still anticipate these times, almost perfectly. And that tells us there's something else going on, a pre-programmed schedule, an internal clock just ticking away. And this internal timer? It has a name, the circadian clock. It's Latin for around a day. The most incredible thing about it is that it's endogenous. That just means it comes from within. It's like a self-winding watch that keeps perfect time all on its own, even without any cues from the outside world, like sunlight. You can think of it as the master conductor for the body's entire daily orchestra. Okay, so if this clock is the master conductor, where's the conductor's podium? To find it, we need to zoom in, way in, past the fly's behavior, deep into its brain, where we'll find a small, very specialized group of neurons that act as the command center for this whole timekeeping operation. And when I say small, I mean it. In each half of the fly's brain, there are only about 150 of these master clock neurons. I mean, that's it. It's a surprisingly tiny number of cells, but this little group is in charge of orchestrating the daily rhythms for the entire fly. What you're looking at here is a map of those crucial neuron groups. And this is where things get really mind-blowing. The entire 24-hour timekeeping mechanism, the whole shebang, can actually function inside a single one of these cells. Each individual neuron is its own perfect self-contained clock. So how on earth does a single cell keep time? Well, it all comes down to a handful of proteins that act in this really precise repeating sequence. So let's meet the main characters in our story, the proteins that kick off the entire daily cycle. First up, we have a protein with a perfectly fitting name, clock. Now, clock is what we call a transcription factor. You can think of its job as being a genetic switch. It binds to DNA to control which genes get turned on and which get turned off. But clock doesn't work alone. It's part of a dynamic duo. To do its job, it needs a partner, another protein called cycle. And together, these two form an inseparable team that really drives the whole clock forward. So both clock and cycle have these special structures called BHLH domains. You can think of them as little molecular hands that let them get a really good grip on the DNA. When they team up, they form what's called a heterodimer, basically a complex made of two different proteins. And it's this duo right here that holds the key to starting the clock. All right, now we get to the real heart of the mechanism. This is the big moment, the positive activation event. This is when our duo, CLK and CYC, flips the on switch, starting that 24-hour countdown. Okay, so picture this. We're zooming deep inside the nucleus of one of those clock neurons. As midday starts to roll around, our activators, clock and cycle, they spring into action. Their mission? To find a very specific target somewhere in that huge genetic blueprint of the cell's DNA. So here's how it goes down. First, clock and cycle pair up. Then, this power duo zips into the nucleus and starts scanning the DNA for a very specific landing pad, a sequence known as an E-box. When they find it and lock on, it's just like flipping a light switch. That one action triggers the cell to start reading, or transcribing, two absolutely essential clock genes, one called period and the other called timeless. And that right there, that's the starting pistol for the whole race against time. The moment clock and cycle bind to that E-box, the entire 24-hour cycle officially begins. It's the molecular go signal. But you know, a clock can't just have an on switch, right? To be a real cycle, the process that just got started also has to be stopped. And this happens through a really beautiful biological mechanism called a negative feedback loop. So once those period and timeless genes are switched on, the cell starts making their proteins, which are called PER and TIM. These proteins are built out in the cytoplasm, that's the area outside the nucleus, and as the day turns into night, the levels of these two proteins just start to build up and up and up. As the concentration gets higher and higher, the PER and TIM proteins start finding each other. And just like their activators, they pair up.
This brand new PR/TIM dimer then travels back inside the nucleus, returning to the scene of the crime, so to speak.
So, what happens when they get back inside the nucleus? Well, the PR/TIM complex goes right up to the CLK/CYC activators and just shuts them down. It essentially blocks them from turning on any more PER and TIM genes. So, in this perfect feedback loop, the things that were made have now shut down their own production line. That's the off switch. And the timing of this entire thing, this intricate dance of turning genes on, making proteins, having them build up, and then shutting the whole process off again, is perfectly calibrated to take, you guessed it, about 24 hours. That, right there, is the clock. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's a neat trick for a fruit fly, but why does it matter to me? Well, it turns out this fundamental design isn't just a one-off for flies. It's an ancient, evolutionarily conserved masterpiece of biological engineering. Just take a look. On the right, you've got the fly clock we've been talking about, and on the left, that's the clock from a mouse. The design is, well, it's almost identical. The master activators in the mouse are clock and a protein called BIMA1, which is basically the mammal version of cycle. It's the same elegant feedback loop, preserved across hundreds of millions of years of evolution. And this isn't just about flies and mice. A version of this ancient clock is ticking away inside nearly every single cell of your body right now. It's the silent conductor that's orchestrating your sleep, your metabolism, your hormones, pretty much everything. So that brings us to a final really big thought. This clock of ours evolved over millions of years, perfectly tuned to the natural cycle of day and night. But our modern world, with 24/7 electric lights, shift work, jet lag, is constantly throwing a wrench into this ancient rhythm. It really makes you wonder, what's the long-term cost of living so out of sync with our own internal time?